So, Bran,
Yeah.
I asked ChatGPT to name me a random basketball player. Its answer was AI.
Joke be damned. The utter disrespect to Allen Iverson to even insinuate due to wordplay that he is random. How dare you?
I need to give the credit to that to our guy Alex Schubert, who has been a loyal listener watcher. I see him in chat right now. He tweeted this at me and said, "Use this," and I was glad you didn't see it. The payoff. So Alex, I listen. We appreciate Alex. We appreciate everybody who watches our stream, listens to us. Whatever you do to consume us. So word.
This is where we're at now as a show, as a community. We've got longtime viewers going under my nose to feed you jokes, to feed me later on in the show. We've created back channels to fucking feed me some of these jokes. You know what? It's fine. It's fine. Anything for the folks to engage with us, we love. But I'm just saying, I'm watching all of you. I'm watching. Got my fucking eye on you. Folks, welcome back to Brand Coverage. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. And Pat, we're again, I feel like I say this every few weeks, we're in that point of the offseason where it's like there's not a lot of, especially free agent related news. We're not close enough yet to the draft. Like once we get about a week out, we'll have some more, I think, news and notes to kind of nosh on and nibble on as far as it goes for the draft. But what we did have this week were the head coach meetings. They had the head coaches all got together and took that funny picture that they always take every year that people dissect, and Nick Sirianni
serving.
Andy, he always is. Nick Sirianni looking like he's late for a tee time at the cheapest golf course you could find on the planet. Liam Cohen and Kellen Moore right next to each other. They both looked like it was their first day of preschool, just grinning ear to ear. I guess that's what happens when you are a first-time head coach. But we have some news that came out of those coach meetings. We also had some NFL rule changes and some non-rule changes that came out of the meeting of the competition committee and such. Today, actually, was when all those things got either finalized or not finalized. So we'll go over all of that, and then we will also go over March Madness reactions, our just general Yukon update at the end of the show, but more importantly, and maybe the most fun part of the show, will be in honor of April Fool's Day. We are going to do a draft of players that fooled us, and if you're wondering, folks, yes, this is basically a dudes just sit around naming random football players draft. It's an excuse to do that because these are going to be players that we thought were going to be really good at the time or at a time, and ended up they fooled us.
That's the thing. Like, it's not a case where we're just like gonna rattling off NBA role players of the 2000s.
Right,
like these were guys that were supposed to be something. We're just not naming Brian Hartline unless he's on your list, maybe.
No, I would say, that's a good example of a guy that's like he's a random, sort of random. Honestly, Brian Hartline had one year where he was actually really, really
That's why I was like, oh shit, I hope he's not on your list.
Guys like that are super random. Like one guy that comes to mind that I don't think anybody really thought was going to be great, like Mikel LaShore. He gets brought up a lot for random names, but I don't ever remember him being like, oh, this guy could be a top 5 back. It was more like, oh, this guy is just kind of fun and he might have a good game sometimes. But yeah, let's get into it, Pat. We'll start with the NFL rule changes or non-rule changes. In this case, it was a non-rule change. The tush-push vote has been tabled because the NFL and the competition committee knew that they would not get enough votes to ban it. So rather than allow it to actually go to a vote, they've decided to push it off until May. I'm not sure exactly what the point of this is, if they are hoping to convince some more people that it should be banned between now and then. But 16 teams were in favor of banning it, which means 16 teams were against. I have been very vocal in the sentiment that I think it's incredibly fucking stupid, the idea of banning it at all. Strictly because if no other team is good at it, don't ban it. They are going under this guise of player safety concerns, even though there is no data to support that whatsoever. And the other argument is pace of play was brought up, which It's just a play.
Just
if
a
you're
bunch
saying
of dudes on top of each other.
I mean, like, if I guess the argument is you have to peel guys off of the pile, and that takes longer than any other play. But I'm also like, no, any play that if you complete a pass 40 yards downfield and everyone has to go from the line of scrimmage to the new line of scrimmage, that's going to take the same amount of time as peeling guys off of a pile to run the next play, which will be 2 yards from where the previous play was run. It just seems like a lot of bad faith arguments being presented to cover up for the fact that teams are mad that the Eagles are just really fucking good at it.
And I forgot what coach it was, but one coach said that it's not a football play, and it's like, is anything? Like, at one point, there was no forward passing in football. Right. Like, it's called evolution of the game. Like, yeah, you might say that it's, like cheaper or whatever you want to call it, but at the end of the day,
I don't even see that.
It's an innovative play that the Eagles have mastered, and you should give them credit for that. And unless there is real imminent danger, which there isn't, there's no reason to ban it at all.
I also think it's so funny that this is the one time that a play that is more conducive to offense seems to have some opposition from the league itself. Because Roger Goodell made some comments about it, again, pertaining to safety. But like, the tush push is an automatic play that gets the Eagles a new set of downs. And should other teams, kind of figure out how to do this, that's more scoring opportunities for them as well. It seems like the NFL has tailored everything they've done for the last 20 years to scoring more points and more offense and making life harder on the defense. But then this is the one area where they're like, actually, no, we might want to ban this one because it's ugly, I guess. Like, I don't really understand where anybody's coming from. I'm glad it got tabled. I'm glad that not even, or I guess exactly half of the league is against banning it, because I saw a lot of really good points from a lot of coaches around the league. I saw Mike Vrabel specifically bringing up, like, well, are we going to ban Lamar from scrambling because he's so good at it? And a lot of coaches, I think, are very clear-headed on the subject. So, yeah, just a weird vibe to me that teams are trying to ban this play. With just no good logic for it. There's no injury data. There's nothing that is legitimate other than we're butthurt that we can't do it as well. Go ahead.
Do you personally like the tush push? I mean, I don't. I think it's lame, but at the end of the day, it's effective. Exactly. Like, who cares whether I like it or not? Like, it's effective.
Yeah, I don't care. Like, do I like the tush push? I wouldn't say I like watching it, but I don't like watching any QB sneak. None of them are all that interesting. It's like
Tom Brady's.
Well, I mean, I could watch people touch that man's butt all day. You know what I'm saying? No, any play that you are specifically trying to only get 2 or 3 yards is not going to be that pretty of a play. Like, that's just kind of how it goes. So I'm not. I don't have any strong feelings about, like, the optics of the play one way or the other. So I think it's creative. I definitely appreciate it in that sense that the Eagles are so fucking good at it. I definitely appreciate that part of it. But yeah, we'll see. We'll revisit this in a month and a half whenever I guess they're going to talk about it again. Again, I don't know what the point is of tabling it and waiting. I guess that I don't know, maybe they're going to send, like, email threats out to all the coaches that said they would vote not to ban it and just kind of threaten their families and try to do whatever they can to get this done, because as of right now, it just does not have the support. And good, because fuck them. More rule changes. Kickoffs. Touchbacks will now come out to the 35-yard line instead of the 30 to incentivize even more returns. And this is because it will make kickers try to not kick it through the end zone, try to avoid kicking it through the end zone even more than they already have by incentivizing them to kick it short of it. The NFL is projecting a return increase from, it was 33% this past season. With the initial changes, they are projecting that it could be a return percentage between 60 and 70% with this rule change, which I think makes sense. I mean, what kicker is going to want to voluntarily just boot the ball through the end zone when you could take your chances on a return and stopping the return man from reaching the 35? That seems like probably a good bet. Like, you could do that more often than not. So, Pat, how do you feel about this rule change? And again, I mentioned before how so many rule changes are just in catering to the offense. Here's another one because it's field position related. Well, how are you feeling about this one?
That's the thing, is, like, I feel like this is something that just flat out doesn't need to exist. Like, I'm a fan of just giving the team the ball at the 20-yard line.
No more kickoffs,
because the whole thing with kickoffs is something that is genuinely dangerous. You've got guys coming from all angles, like, that is where the most guys end up getting hurt. So I understand why, there's been so much talk about it, why there's been so many changes, but the ball at the 35-yard line is kind of crazy in terms of
it's definitely drastic.
Advantage to the offense. So like I understand if that's the perspective they're looking at, then it's effective. I think it's going to be effective. I just think it's like let the kickoff return die. Like, you know, if that's the direction that it's headed in, where it's just these kickers just boot it through and don't want to, you know, give up the return, it's just like, let the thing, at the end of the day, it's not that big of a part of the game outside of the, you know, the beginning and half. And then, you know, punts are a whole different story, but, you know, specifically kickoffs, it's just like, it's not a huge part, you know, outside of offense, defense, and punting, and even field goals. It's kind of after all that. So it's like, I don't think it's something that necessarily needs to be prioritized. But again, I think if like, you know, this is their purpose and this is their goal, I think they're going to achieve that. And if they can achieve that and guys aren't getting hurt like they have been, fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the injury data in front of me, but I know, you know, part of the reason for the initial kickoff change with the kind of stationary stance before the ball is kicked or before the ball is caught, was to reduce those injuries. And I think they were successful at that. So it seems to me like they're trying to kind of balance the best of both worlds here, because your suggestion of starting it at the 20, which obviously had been floated in the past, I don't think there's a chance in hell, because that would just create bad enough field position where the NFL, like, I think the NFL is loving this combination of you get to keep the kick return because the play itself can be exciting when you do have a guy that actually breaks one off, but also even if you don't have that, you have teams starting with incredibly good field position. I would imagine if they eliminated the kickoff, they would probably still start drives at like the 30, if I had to guess. Maybe we'll get to that point if anything, but I'm okay with it. I mean, it's very clear what the NFL is trying to do. Again, they want more points, they want more returns, they don't want to kill the kickoff. So it's fine. It wasn't necessarily a change I was expecting, because I kind of figured a return percentage of like 33% was fine, quite honestly.
I like the dynamic kickoff, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind the dynamic kickoff. I think the people that were hating on it because visually it looked weird, I mean, like, there was something I was like, you'll get used to it. Like, it's really not that bad. I know we're used to a certain way, the visual of all the players running as the kicker runs up to the ball that we had in years prior, but that's just not what we have anymore. People will get used to it. But I don't know. I wasn't expecting a major change to this, because like kick returns, to hope for a kick return well over half the time, which is what they're projecting, that's crazy. Like that's going to be very noticeably different in the season to come if that does transpire. So we'll see if their projections are right, but we've got another tweak to the kickoff as the NFL continues to try to prevent its demise. Overtime, Pat, is the next rule change that we have, and this one, unlike the kickoff change, I think was a long time coming. Another step in the direction that the NFL is just trying to make their overtimes make more sense. Overtimes in the regular season will now match the postseason. Both teams will get to possess the ball at least one time. The period will last still 10 minutes. There was a proposal to bring it up to 15, but it is going to stay at 10. So NFL overtimes can still end in a tie, just less likely now, I guess. How do you feel about this one, Pat? Because I feel like this is a good step for now. I also feel like this is not going to be the last change we see made going forward.
I mean, I like it. I like it a lot here, because everybody was like, oh, the college rules. And it's just like, yeah, it makes sense that, like, yeah, you give both teams, you know, a rebuttal here back and forth, but some of those games are like a farce. These games that will, like, go into, like, 5-6 overtime, scores, like, 49-47. It's like, that is not a representation of what the game was.
Yeah.
Like, all those points being put on the board in overtime is almost just, like, disingenuous. Again, the lame pick I'm personally a fan of, play another 10 minutes. Whoever's in the lead at the end of the 10 minutes wins. If they're tied, even if they both score a touchdown and you're tied, you tie. Like, you know, make it like basketball. But this is definitely, I think, about as, like, fair as you can get without it getting gimmicky.
Yeah.
Where, you know, the coin toss does really matter, because at the end of the day, you know, you go score a touchdown, you're putting a ton of pressure on the other offense. And even if they score, then it becomes a sudden death deal again with you possessing the football. So, I mean, it's an improvement. It's a massive improvement. Remember when teams could just march down the field and kick a field goal? Like, that was insanity. We have moved so far from there, and I think we're in a sweet spot.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I think this might be the last major change we see for a little while, but I do think like we are just going to get closer and closer to some version of the college overtime. I don't think they're going to adopt it completely because I think you're right. That is a little gimmicky in itself, and especially like I've mentioned this many times, and it always sounds almost disingenuous when you bring it up, but like fantasy football would be so broken if they adopted college overtimes and like counted things as touchdowns.
Shit.
Like I think you and like as much as, it's just fantasy and it's not, but like that is such a big part of like football culture and like football fan culture. Like I almost think you would have to just completely eliminate stats from overtimes,
or you'd have to call it all 2-point conversions, like make the touchdown catches 2 points instead.
Right.
Because they are genuine touchdowns. You put 6 points on the board for it. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that would be
like, imagine there have been college games where they go back and forth for like six possessions and like, imagine Jamar Chase just gets 4 touchdowns in overtime. Yeah, it's like, that could be
insane.
That would be a fun one, but yeah, not realistic, I don't think. But this is good for now. It didn't make a lot of sense to have overtime periods not match, postseason versus regular season. It just kind of felt like an open admission. And granted, this is true, but like an open admission that, postseason football matters more than the regular season. But like we should be evening those two out as much as we can. The regular season is what sets up the postseason, and we should be still taking that pretty seriously and doing what we can to make those overtime periods as fair as we possibly can so we can get the correct winner and have the standings shake out the right way at the end of the year. Replay assist has been expanded. This is the other new piece of, or new change, I should say. The on-site replay official will now be permitted to reverse flags that are thrown for hits to defenseless players, along with fouls for face mask, horse collar, tripping, and running into / roughing the kicker. The replay official will not be permitted to call a penalty for a play in which no flag was thrown. I feel like this is another one that there's going to be more changes going forward because, honestly, the first thing I thought when I read this was, so you mean to tell me the 2 times that Sam Darnold had his face mask ripped off of his fucking head, essentially, and it wasn't called, we cannot do anything about that still based on this change. Now, I think the more we expand it, the better, obviously, as long as we don't get too crazy, because we want to get calls right as much as we possibly can. But this does, again, just kind of feel like the tip of the iceberg. On top of the next thing that I'll just mention really quickly, they are officially going to have Sony's Hawkeye technology being used to measure first downs. The chain crew will remain on the sideline as a backup. So it seems like the NFL is willing to optimize things a little bit more. And we're probably just going to keep going that direction. But what do you think about the replay changes?
Well, obviously I'm an officiating simp. I mean, particularly baseball. But this is great because there are so many things that, especially now with the emphasis on player safety, a lot of these calls, a lot of these officials are trigger happy in terms of making these calls. The biggest thing I did not like is that roughing the passer was not part of this, because I think that has been the most controversial. Yeah. Honestly, really, the only big controversy. Obviously, there's, like you said, there were the big Sam Darnold face mask, but it feels like every week there's a brutal roughing the passer call. So you're going to use the replay assist, but not for that? I don't quite understand. And I do like the fact that they just can't go and throw their own flags like that. Because think about it, what percentage of plays do you think there's some kind of penalty on? I bet you it's a lot. Whether it's holding, I understand they're focusing on the safety things. I understand that, but do I think that ends up being incorporated? Probably. Like if this goes well with the replay assist, I think it'll probably be at the point where they can maybe just like egregious flags, but that's subjective. Like you don't want to make officiating more subjective than it already is. But again, another step in the right direction. And the Hawkeye, we talked about that at length after the AFC Championship game that was. That there was no reason in this day and age to mark the ball with your eyes and a chain gang. I love the fact that they're keeping the chain gang, even if it's as backup or nothing. The aesthetic, the aura, keep it there. Like, that's classic football. I want to see these geezers running with the chains and measuring for the hell of it. Why not do it too? Like, I still like all that, but there is no reason in the year 2025 that we, are still using that. And again, this keeps the human element in there. This does keep the human element in terms of the replay assist, But in terms of spotting a football, when you are watching so many different things, it is just so difficult to place that. So that is, honestly, that's the best of everything we've talked about, in my opinion, is the Hawkeye.
100% agree. I mean, you have to, aesthetics aside, you have to keep the chain gang on the sideline, because what if the fucking Sony Hawkeye gets EMP'd
of course,
or the Russians hack it or some shit, and then the game's just over. So they got to be there just in case we have a Ravens 49ers Super Bowl situation where the power just fucking goes out and we can't do anything about it. So that makes sense. But yeah, I think with the replay thing, you make a very good point about roughing the passer, and I think where this will end up going is probably there will just be more and more things that they are able to review, but there will have to be certain things left off the table, because I agree, you definitely can't get to a point where like a coach can throw a flag or throw a challenge flag and say, hey, I think there was a hold on that play, go review it. Yeah. Like, that would be a disaster. Like, because people joke about there being holding on virtually every play. There is
probably.
Like, yeah. There is. So I think it would be being able to throw a flag that wasn't previously thrown after a review. I think that would be plausible for things like a face mask, because you can see clearly. Yeah. And it is such a big penalty. I think certain things like, I don't know though, I'm saying it out loud now and I'm like, is that different from holding as far as what the actual penalty like yardage is? No, I guess it's not. So I don't know. I guess maybe just it would have to be for very specific things, because you certainly, we can't get to a point where play is being stopped just all the fucking time. It would
remember the pass interference thing? I can't remember what year it was, but pass interferences could be challenged, and it was just brutal. Yeah. It was just brutal, and that went away relatively quickly, and you don't hear about that nearly as much. Like, I think holding is absolutely off the table. I think pass interference is off the table, maybe unless there's targeting involved. You know, if there is a head-to-head contact and somehow they don't call a pass interference on that or whatever, again, the safety things, I get why they want to focus on those. But yeah, if we're gonna, if there's literally just another official up there watching everything that can throw a flag at his will, that would be just awful. That would be absolutely awful. So again, similarly, it feels like another sweet spot here, or at least a sweet spot for now.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, like, these are all pretty good developments for this offseason. The NFL, I will give them credit. Outside of, we had a little scare, I think, last offseason with the hip drop tackle stuff being introduced, because we were like, oh, fuck, this is gonna be bad. This is gonna be enforced at the fucking exact wrong time, and it's gonna ruin. And then they never called it, which is bad in its own right, because there were times where there was a hip drop, it did lead to an injury and nothing. I mean, I think some guys were penalized maybe after the fact, but it was almost never called in real time. So definitely a lot of worry for nothing. But these are seemingly overwhelmingly positive steps in the right direction. So we'll just have to monitor where things go from here.
And I guess not to go too far on the hip drop tangent, like, these guys get fined. You think they care? Like, to actually punish these players is on-field penalties that will harm the team. They will face way more repercussions from that than $15,000 to the NFL's charity of choice. Like, so if you really want to enforce that, you've got to do it in-game.
That is true. All right. Next up, we've got some news and some notes from the head coach meetings. I'm going to hit the sound effect, even though I probably could have hit it from before or whatever.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
Better late than never.
Better late than never. I mean, hey, it's a segment change. That's what we call a transition, a segue in the business here, folks. All right. There's some stuff that came out over the last few days from these head coach meetings and just from, the NFL rumor mill in general, some of which we are going to apply the BS meter to. Some of it is just straight up news, so we won't do that. But certain things are being said, and they are insinuating certain other things, and we just want to break these down and see if we can actually take them at face value, especially from a fantasy football perspective, because some of that stuff is starting to pop up as these coaches talk about some of their players. Now, the first thing I'm going to bring up, though, is not necessarily something we're going to apply the BS meter to. It is just more Cowboys drama, because when is there fucking not? The Cowboys have reportedly offered a record contract to Micah Parsons to make him the new highest paid non-quarterback in the league. I feel like we've said that almost every week about a different player this offseason. But without his agent involved. Jerry said, fuck David Mulugeta, which, fair, I mean, kind of fuck that guy. But he said, fuck your agent. I am going to offer you this deal under the table. He actually came out and said, I don't know his agent's name. I don't know who it is. So Jerry's just kind of trying to under the table deal with this. And then Micah Parsons commented and said, David is the best, and I will not be doing any deal without him involved. Like anyone with good sense, I hired experts for a reason. There is no one I trust more when it comes to negotiating contracts than David. There will be no back doors in this contract negotiation. So I cannot help but laugh, Pat, that the one time Jerry Jones, and I'm not even going to call this early, but the one time he tries to get an extension done earlier than, on the doorstep of the season starting, he's doing it in this crackpot way that is almost still offending the player. And there also have been conflicting reports as to how much the contract is for, if it was actually a record-breaking deal for non-quarterbacks, But either way, this is the part that we're addressing, is that Jerry is just, again, making headlines for the wrong reasons as it pertains to his star players. Why do we have a new topic about this man every 2 weeks? How senile is he?
And the thing is, this is one of their best draft picks in recent memory, getting one of the best defenders in the league who can seemingly line up almost anywhere, 12th overall. Like, that's a huge feather. That's a huge feather in Jerry Jones and company's hat there to make that draft pick. Why the shenanigans around? Lock the player up. Like, you want Micah Parsons there for the foreseeable future. Like, there feels like no reason to take. I've never heard of that before for someone to say your agent cannot be involved. It's like, that's their job. Yeah. To see, because the thing is, the players, they don't necessarily know the business as well. The agents are there to see through potential BS. It's like, I'm just very puzzled by why Jerry thinks anyone would do that.
Yeah, Jerry's exact quote was, "The agent is not a concern here. I don't know his name," which David Mulugeta, for better or for worse, is one of the more prominent agents in the NFL, mostly known for getting Deshaun Watson that contract with the Cleveland Browns, fully guaranteed, coming off of all those allegations and such. So, again, that's why I kind of said, fuck David Mulugeta to an extent. But, he's a very well-known agent. He's done a lot of things in this league. He represents a lot of players. So for Jerry to just be blatantly, not just disrespectful, but I assume lying. I assume there's no way he doesn't know Micah's agent's name. I can't imagine that that's a legitimate possibility. Just Jerry Jones making headlines for the wrong reasons again, making drama where there doesn't need to be, when he could have just gotten out ahead of this, paid his star player, and gone on with his day. But when has Jerry Jones ever simply gone on with his fucking day? So what else is new, I guess? All right, next. Steelers owner / president Art Rooney says he has a good feeling about Aaron Rodgers. Says signs are pointing in that direction of him signing. Another case of same old shit, different day, I think. Aaron Rodgers has to continue to stay in the news cycle. We have to continue to be hung out on this thread of, his every whim, his every move, his timeline of everything. So, I mean, look, I'm taking this comment as, again, Rodgers likes dragging things out, but I do think after this comment, he's probably going to be a Steeler. I think that feels a little more solidified in my mind maybe than it was before at the very least. So we're headed that direction, at least, as Art Rooney would say. But that's all it really is.
As opposed to Mike Tomlin, who was very, coach wishy-washy. Like, oh, yeah, there's no timeline. We're waiting on him. He's waiting on us, blah. To even imply that it could be heading in that direction, again, it is probably going to lean in that direction. But again, Rodgers does need to drag this out as long as humanly possible, as if the media wouldn't be all over it anyway if he signs with the Steelers throughout the offseason and training camp. Far more substance to this than definitely some of this other shit we're gonna hear.
Yeah, and obviously makes sense given the need. So we'll see if and when that actually comes to pass, but it certainly sounds like it's heading that direction. The Browns, Pat, mentioned Deshaun Watson a couple seconds ago. The Browns have openly admitted their mistake on Deshaun Watson. So this has to be good news for Browns fans, because no longer are they continuing to pretend that this is going to work out, that they made the right move. Now, I don't know why it took 2 Achilles tears for you to reach that conclusion, and it wasn't the absolute dog shit effort and production that he put forth on a football field for 2 years that could have led you to this conclusion and didn't. But nonetheless, they finally reached this realization with owner Jimmy Haslam saying, we took a big swing and miss with Deshaun. We thought we had the quarterback, we didn't, and we gave up a lot of draft picks to get him. So we've got to dig ourselves out of that hole. The trade was an entire organization decision, and it ends with D&I, so hold us accountable. 1, we will. You guys are fucking morons. 2, this is as clear a sign as ever, Pat, that Deshaun Watson has played his last snap as a Cleveland Brown.
And honestly, perhaps as an NFL quarterback.
Absolutely. Very much possible. I think we suspected this could be the case when he went down with the Achilles injury because we looked at it as, oh, this can be their excuse to get out of this deal in one way or another. And now with these comments, I mean, the guy, he can't play another snap for them after these comments. They openly admitted we made a mistake bringing this guy in. Now, the exact way or methods of them going about getting out of this contract, I don't know. I'm sure there's some injury language in there that maybe they can leverage. But either way, Deshaun is done, which leaves the Browns as, even more of a quarterback landing spot here for this draft, maybe the next draft, maybe it's for Kirk Cousins, who was spotted at a Cleveland Chipotle a week ago or whatever the fuck it was. So where do you think the Browns will go from here, Pat? And what do you think about this these comments here?
Well, first of all, like you said, fuck them. This is on them. But some kudos for taking blame. They could have played the whole thing. They could have played the whole thing off like, oh yeah, we'll see how he goes through injury recovery and yada yada yada, and then be like, oh, he hasn't recovered sufficiently, we're moving on. For him to just come out and say, yeah, like, we fucked up. Credit where credit's due there. But you look at this, would be even bad if take all the allegations, take all the off the field stuff out of this. If Deshaun Watson was signed to the contract he was and performed the way he did, that alone would be a disaster. That alone could be considered a failure. You take everything else and now bring everything else into the equation. A guy with 26 sexual assault allegations, which, whether he deserves it or not, that has to have an impact on somebody mentally and emotionally. And didn't play football for a year and a half pretty much. To trade the farm for him, sign him to an insane guaranteed contract. Like,
that's always the most ridiculous part.
Like,
of it
this is
like,
literally just like them stepping on their dicks over and over and over and over again. And for him to be as bad as it was is just the chef's kiss of the whole situation. Like, again, he could have gone there and he could have been Deshaun Watson and he could have been really good. And this could have kind of been, I mean, obviously he would still rightfully have his haters, but people would kind of look past him. Or the fact that he was as bad as it is just the cherry on top of this absolute dog shit Sunday.
Yeah, just because, when they're trading for him, it is sacrificing their morality for, oh, we're gonna have a really great quarterback finally. Like, we'll overlook any sort of moral issues that he or we may have, and we will sell our souls for the idea of finally having a quarterback that is elite and that will occupy this position for a decade plus and lead us to greatness. And to not even get that, so now you look like shitty people that overlook shitty actions, and you got zero benefit from it, is just the pinnacle of get fucked. So the Browns deserve this position that they're in. We seem to have reached a finish line for the Deshaun Watson era in Cleveland. Pat, where are we at with what they're going to do to address it? Do you think this is going to be a Shador situation still, or do you think this is more of a Kirk Cousins situation, Band-Aid on the wound and address it later?
Or both. Potentially.
Could be both.
I think that, there were some rumblings after the combine that the Browns really liked either one of these guys, Cam Ward or Shador, and they were comfortable taking either one of them. And the fact that they've effectively done nothing in their QB room shows that they're very likely at least going to draft one. Is that going to be their starting quarterback week one this year? Perhaps not. But I just think from everything that we have seen, especially the fact that it seems Cam Ward will be number one, that Shador's going to be a Brown, and I just don't. After all this talk about how, big market, good, well-run organization, Dion's going to put him where he wants. The Cleveland Browns, arguably the worst-run franchise in the league, in fucking Cleveland. No disrespect to Cleveland. I've been there. Beautiful view of one of the Great Lakes right next to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't remember which one. Any Cleveland stands in chat right now want to drop in on that. But that would just be absolutely hilarious. But I think that's what happens.
Shador Sanders, Cedric Tillman stack about to hit like crack in fantasy next year. Pat, are you fucking ready? Yeah, so the Browns admit they made a mistake. That's all well and good. All right, now I think we're getting into the point where we can kind of label these things BS or not BS, because we are just taking these coaches and owners at, face value or not taking them at face value. So first we've got, and I think this one's just also accurate, but Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson will compete. Shane Steichen says that Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson will split starting reps beginning in OTAs, and the most consistent quarterback will be the regular season starter. Now, the way to interpret this as BS, if you so choose, would be that they want to light a fire under Anthony Richardson, and he is going to be the starter either way. Where are you at with this, Pat? Do you think this is a legitimate competition and that there is a legitimate chance that Daniel Jones, if he outperforms Richardson in camp, he could be the Colts starter week 1?
Yes, I do think, but I think it's just BS that they're doing this at all.
I agree.
I think if you want to consider moving forward with Anthony Richardson, you need to put all of your confidence into him. You need to say, hey, we still believe in you. This is your last chance, but we still believe that you can make something of this last chance. You don't bring in someone who has been as bad as Daniel Jones. You bring in, like, say they brought in Kirk Cousins, for example, and say he's going to compete with you. You're like, yeah, Kirk Cousins, okay. It's Daniel Jones. We're talking about Daniel Jones. Like, again, I've seen all the memes were like, oh, if Anthony Richardson doesn't outduel Daniel Jones, then he deserves to be, he's cooked. And like, yes, you're right. But to effectively say like, hey, yeah, we have, I don't say little, but we do not have enough confidence in you to say that you are going to get more starter reps than fucking Daniel Jones going into the season. I just think it's a bad idea from the personnel perspective, from the emotional perspective. But at the end of the day, I don't think either of them is a particularly good option. Yeah. And I think the Colts and Shane Steichen are kind of sitting ducks.
I think that's fair. They're definitely seemingly in purgatory with these two options. I'm a little torn on it because Anthony Richardson, the way he has performed the last 2 years, I think does need a fire lit under him a little bit, and I don't think you are going to adequately be able to light that fire by just giving him the job or having a run-of-the-mill backup who, look, Daniel Jones, I think Daniel Jones is a pretty bad quarterback, but like he is an accomplished, or is that wrong word, seasoned NFL quarterback. Like he's been around this league a while, he started a lot of games, so he is a guy that when you bring him in, Anthony Richardson's like, oh fuck, I have to actually like try to fend this guy off. I think that might be the kind of fire that he needs lit under him, because there has been some questions about his motivation and his preparedness for games. That was rumored to be part of why he was benched for those 2 games for Joe Flacco. It wasn't just about him subbing himself out, but that's another piece of it. Like we talked about that when it happened. You can't be doing that. It is the complete and utter wrong mentality to have as a quarterback. At the same time, I think Anthony Richardson needs to be the starter for the Colts all season. And it's because of, I heard a great argument from I think both of our idols, Pat, Matthew Berry. He was talking about it from a Commander's point of view.
I did see that as well.
He was talking about how when the Commanders were heading into the season 2 seasons ago, where they were either going to start Sam Howell or Jacoby Brissett, he was like, I really want us to start Sam Howell because we need to see what he can do. And if he can't do anything, if he's really not cut out for the NFL, then we're going to tank, we're going to have a bad record, and we're going to be in a position to draft Jaden Daniels. If they started Jacoby Brissett, the idea was that Jacoby Brissett might keep them afloat enough to keep them in QB purgatory. That is seemingly the kind of situation we could be headed to with Richardson and Jones, where Jones, surrounded by the right weapons and with the right coaching, we've seen Daniel Jones make a playoff and win a playoff game. Like, that would be a complete and utter disaster for the Colts because they're not winning a Super Bowl. They're not winning a Super Bowl. They're not getting to a conference championship game. But could they sniff a wild card spot? 100% they could with Daniel Jones. But with Anthony Richardson, either you're going to find out that he's good, he can make the leap, he can be an NFL quarterback, or he is going to crash and fucking burn, and you are going to be at the top of the draft next year ready to remedy this issue.
Honestly, I think there's a scenario where Anthony Richardson leads them into that kind of purgatory, even with Anthony Richardson under center. And I think if you're Colts ownership, you see that as not good enough, and that as the dumpster fire and the reason to move on. And in
at
that
least
case,
if you do that, it happened with him leading the way, and for you have your answer about him.
Yeah, well, exactly, because say they win 6 or 7, 7 games, it's like, okay, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good enough. And I think at that point you are looking at a new GM and new head coach in Indy, and those are the ones who will decide the future. But unfortunately for them, similarly to what we've talked about the Steelers time and time again, in QB purgatory in terms of the draft.
Yeah, so I would chalk this one up as not BS that the competition is going to be very real, but certainly questionable decision-making to have this sort of competition. I guess the way I expressed it about what they should do, because I do think he needs the competition, I would hope that in the back of their minds, they're like, look, as long as Richardson's at least close in this competition, we're going to give him the nod. Like, it doesn't, if Anthony Richardson's completion percentage in, camp and preseason games is 56% and Jones's is 57%, I would hope they would still give Richardson, the job, just for the sake of finding out what you have in him when the lights are actually on, because there's just really not a lot of benefit to starting Daniel Jones for an entire season. Joe Shane, speaking of where Daniel Jones used to be, Joe Shane does not believe the Giants need to draft a quarterback. He said, going into it, we can go any which direction and we can go play a game right now. It doesn't force you into a corner or force you to have to take something based on need. It gives us optionality to go in many different directions. Him speaking about the fact that they have signed both Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston in the last few weeks. Pat, do you believe that Joe Shane actually is going into this draft saying, I don't care if we draft a quarterback, or that we don't need to?
Yes, and I think he's correct, quite frankly. I think we talked about this a lot last week, where it's like the Giants want to be bad. Like, they want their boy Arch Manning, or, some other franchise quarterback. And, this year, we've talked, again, another thing that's been brought up, not just by us, but seemingly by everyone, this is not the year of the quarterback. Mm-hmm. Like, can Cam Ward and or Shedeur Sanders be productive quarterbacks? Sure. But the Giants you don't pay Russell Wilson that much money for 1 year, and you don't bring in a backup, once again, as seasoned as Jameis Winston, to just go and use the 3rd overall pick on a quarterback that will sit, if Shedeur is even there. It just doesn't make sense, especially at the fact you're looking at Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, who in a normal year could very well be the 1st overall pick. Either of them have the talent to be the 1st overall pick. Unless Shedeur does fall and you're really in love with him, I guess, but that would just make absolutely no sense to me.
I think he means what he's saying, but I also think it is fueled by a heavy dose of copium. I think it's the fact that he realizes that they are not in a position to draft a quarterback, despite the fact that they desperately need one for both his own job security and Brian Daboll's job security, because we talked about it last week. Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston are not going to get you to a point where it's like, oh yeah, this is a team we can really build on, and like, this is the roster we can move forward. No, these are both rental guys. These are both Band-Aid type quarterbacks. So I think he's going into it saying we don't need to draft a quarterback because, that will, again, back you into a corner just by kind of tipping your hand to other teams about what you might want to do. But, like, this quarterback class is getting a lot of shit, like, beyond Cam Ward. There is not a lot of hype for anybody beyond Cam Ward at this point. So it's very possible that the Giants, along with many other teams, have decided there's no quarterback in here worth a first-round pick. Now, would I be surprised if the Giants didn't come out of this draft with a quarterback? Yes, I would. I think they are going to throw a dart. That's not meant to be a pun, because I don't think it'll be Jackson Dart. I think they are going to throw a dart in sort of the middle rounds, late rounds, hope that they can miraculously hit on a Dak Prescott or a Russell Wilson, ironically enough, one of these 4th or 5th round quarterbacks that just turned out to be a diamond in the rough. But I think that is kind of where they're at. I think they're going to come out with a quarterback. I don't think they're going to do it with their first round pick. Steelers GM says Jaylen Warren is a starter-capable player. Now, this is probably the biggest sort of fantasy takeaway quote we've had thus far. Jaylen Warren, very hot name this time last year, leading into fantasy drafts. Steelers GM Omar Khan said, I do view him as starter capable. He's played a lot of football for us, so obviously we have a lot of confidence. He has a big opportunity this year, and we'll see how it goes. Mike Tomlin was also asked whether Jaylen Warren is a 3-down back, and he said yes. So, BS or not BS, Jaylen Warren, starter capable. Jaylen Warren is going to be the Steelers' starting running back next year, Pat. BS or not BS?
Alone, BS. Like, if they go into the year with their current... Oh, here we go. I thought that was you or me, honestly. I don't know. But if they go in with Jaylen Warren and, oh, God, who they signed somebody else funny.
Steelers, did they? Gross.
Yeah. It's Kenneth Gainwell.
Oh, yes.
Like,
he's a special teamer. Yeah. I don't fuck you. There is such a glaring hole on this depth chart.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If they go into it with their current depth chart, I would be gobsmacked. Again, for a team like the Steelers that have a great defense, or seemingly are bringing in Aaron Rodgers. Jaylen Warren, like, do I think they believe Jaylen Warren could be a 3-down back? Yes, sure. I mean, yeah, he's shown to be solid.
If you were absolutely forced to, yeah.
Yeah, he's never had the opportunity, and like given the opportunity, do I think he would be solid, especially fantasy-wise? Yes, but we're going into a rich running back draft here, where the Steelers did nothing to adjust. They let their 1,000-yard man walk, with nothing. And yeah, I just don't see a scenario where Jaylen Warren is the bell cow or anywhere close to it.
No, my advice would be, if there are any dynasty managers out there that have Jaylen Warren and you have anybody in your league that actually believes or is latching on to these comments, sell this man right now. Because
I agree.
Context, and that's not to say he's not going to be a good player as, kind of the same thing he did alongside Najee Harris. He's still going to be a good NFL player. But this is one of the quotes where like context is really, really important. Like, you have to understand that they were asked about Jaylen Warren and whether they view him this way. What the fuck are they going to say? No? Like,
fuck this guy.
And are they really going to, again, telegraph what they want to do in the draft? Like, no, we don't view Jaylen Warren as a 3-down back. We are going into the draft and we are going to draft a running back. Some teams might come out and say that. Like, I think it was the Broncos may have come out and said, like, we expect to come out of this draft with a running back. We don't know which round that might be. It's a deep class. We know all these things. But, like, most teams won't really tip their hand like that. And I think this is just another one of those cases. And Jaylen Warren is a good player, but they are going to draft a fucking running back. Kenneth Gainwell literally he is like a special teams type of player. He's a fun player as a runner. He's a guy who I've been curious to see get some more work, actually offensively. But I believe it was, somebody was asked about Kenneth Gainwell. I think it might have been Tomlin, but he like specifically unprompted brought up how good he was as a special teamer. And it's like, that doesn't sound like we're heading into next season with Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell as 1A and 1B. It sounds like we have a giant gaping hole that they are going to have one of these running backs in the draft walk right through, and it is inevitable.
And you said, some teams Broncos tip their hand. Literally, I think a lot of these teams, the Steelers, the Cowboys, the Raiders, they tip their hands by doing absolutely fuck all in free agency.
And that's the thing. They're going to lie about it now. Like, they have the evidence is there, but they're going to be like, no, like, we're okay if he's a 3-down back.
Like, if someone went up to Pete Carroll and said, hey, do you think Raheem Mostert can be a 3-down back? And he says yes. Say, yeah. Throw a tomato at him. like there's just no way that these teams.
No, of course he's not. Sincere McCormick is the 3-down back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zamir White, part 3 or
Dylan
2
Lube.
Or 4. Dylan lube me up, daddy. All right.
Okay,
so that one is Jaylen Warren being the Steelers starting running back. Hardcore BS. All right. Speaking of running backs, the Patriots are interested in drafting a running back. Mike Vrabel said, I think so. Having a good young runner, that's potentially something we would like to do. He also made a point to support Ramondre Stevenson, saying that people talk about Ramondre and putting the ball on the ground, and he knows that will help him there, and also going to make sure the other 10 players know their job is to protect the guy with the ball. I don't want to say, like, saying was this quote BS or not BS sounds wrong, but let's just put it this way. Pat, do you actually think, based on these comments, that the Patriots will draft a running back?
I don't know if necessarily will, but I think, yeah, they very well could. I was looking at Ramondre's stats earlier and was underwhelmed. Like, this guy has, has shown some talent, and the numbers are never there. The fumbles are really damning. Granted, Gerard Mayo is gone because it was clear Gerard Mayo had no belief in him. It just so happened that fucking Antonio Gibson was the only other alternative.
Gerard Mayo's brain was just the monkey with the symbols.
We may hear Antonio Gibson's name later in this show. Hint, hint, hint. Wink, wink, wink. So, like, if that being his only other option. But again, it's still the Patriots. Like, you bring in Mike Vrabel, bred from the same tree as Gerard Mayo. The belief just might not be there in him, and I think that's honestly justified. This will be truly the first year going into fantasy where I'm just kind of going to be out on Ramondre Stevenson, even if he's still the guy.
And it hurts me.
2 years ago it was like, oh yeah, this guy's going to get everything. And then this year it was like, well, yeah, he's still going to be the starter. This year it's just like, no. It's just like, no. And I think that is, very well likely that they will draft a running back. Will it be with a premium pick? Maybe not. But there will be other names in the mix, come training camp.
Not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I feel that way about a lot of running backs. I was kind of looking at guys, like, thinking about how I felt about them last year versus how I feel about them this year. And I was like, Ramondre Stevenson, I've been super in on him for like 2 years. I'm with you. I'm probably not touching him with a 10-foot pole this year. Breece Hall, same guy. We'll talk about him in a second. Kenneth Walker, like another guy I loved. I would draft him given the right, pick, but like not a guy I'm expecting to become
RB and then shit my pants and take whoever's there.
Not a guy I'm expecting to like reach RB1 status, which last year I would have said absolutely that's within his range of outcomes. So just funny. Yeah, I think it's possible as well that the Patriots would draft a running back. Again, this is another when you're listening to these coaches' comments, you have to remember sometimes that they are asked about things and then they are just kind of going to tiptoe around it and not say yes or no. So it's almost like the question itself is framing the topic when it wasn't like Mike Vrabel came out and said, we really need a running back, guys. Like that's how he opened up, the presser. Like, yeah, we're heading into the draft. Running back's really a big focus. Somebody asked him and he said, yeah, we'd be open to it. Like that's something we would potentially like to do. With that said, yeah, I think there's a decent chance they draft a running back, mainly because look at what they did in free agency. It was defense up the ass. So now what are the Patriots' needs? Still O-line, still receiver, even after signing Stephon Diggs. But, they're going to have, I don't know how many picks they have. They probably have at least one in every round, roughly 7 picks, something like that. Maybe a few more, a few less. But I could absolutely see one of those picks being attributed to the running back position, considering right now it is Ramondre, underwhelming, like you said. Antonio Gibson, who was fine, but I think just looked better by comparison last year because Ramondre was struggling at times. And then I don't know if JaMychal Hasty's still under contract, but like anybody beyond those two is not much. So we'll put it that way. Yeah, I could definitely see it. It honestly wasn't something I had considered until I saw this quote. And then I was like, yeah, like I don't think we're going to get no Ashton Genty, but like I could see us getting a running back in maybe the 3rd or 4th round or whatever it may be. And I could see that guy ending up with a pretty sizable role if everything broke right. All right. More running back news, also in the AFC East. All 3 running backs for the Jets, Pat, are apparently going to be utilized. Aaron Glenn saying, I think mentally Breece Hall is in a good place, but I would say that we have 3 running backs on this team that we're going to utilize as much as possible. Now, I would say this is the most coach speak sounding sort of quote, because this is the kind of thing you hear all preseason, all offseason. We love the guys we have. We want to get them all involved. We want to get these guys touches. But are you buying this, Pat? Do you think that the Jets are likely to head to a point where this is more of a running back by committee or that this is still Breece Hall's backfield?
I don't buy this one bit, quite frankly. Did Breece Hall have... God damn it. Did Breece Hall have his issues last year, yeah, and did Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis both show some good things in those couple weeks that Hall was out? Sure, but Breece Hall is so fucking talented. Like, we saw, this was the guy who was going as either the RB2 or RB3 last year, and for good reason with what he had done in years past. I think the big question is, what does this team look like under Aaron Glenn and Tanner Engstrad with Justin Fields under center? Because if this offense improves from where they are, and it's just way more of a, less dysfunctional, more functional offense here, Breece Hall could be in a really good position here. To if he can combine his talent with a better offense, we're looking at a potential RB1 here in terms of talent. I just don't know why you would necessarily do that with Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, but it could also be the light of fire. Like you said with Anthony Richardson, could be the light of fire under Breece Hall, but I think we're looking at such a talented running back.
Crazy enough, Pat, I think I buy it. I don't buy that this is going to be like an fart even noise. Rotation. No fart noise, because I don't think it's BS. I'm buying it because, I don't think this is going to be an even rotation with the three guys. Breece is still going to be, the RB1 in this backfield. But got to consider a couple things. One, Glenn is coming from the Lions, where they were the ultimate running back by committee. Now, granted, they had an incredibly elite combination of backs duo to be able to do that. So it would be ignorant to think he's just going to try to do that with whoever the fuck is on the roster here. He's going to evaluate. He's going to scale workloads based on talent, which is why Breece is still going to lead this backfield. But I'm buying it in the sense that I'm completely off the train of Breece, again, we'll bring it back to fantasy, being a fantasy RB1. At least a high-end one. I could see him squeezing into that RB 7 to 10 territory if the Jets offense ends up being good enough that it gives him those scoring opportunities. But I think Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen flashed enough last year, and Breece Hall has had some issues just being dinged up and not being as explosive as you would expect him to be, that I absolutely see good reason for them to kind of limit his workload. Now, what does that mean for fantasy overall? I think that takes Breece Hall to more of a high-end RB2 is where I would be comfortable drafting him. And I don't know. I don't think either Isaiah Davis or Braylon Allen are going to be worth starting on a weekly basis, how Montgomery and Gibbs both were with Aaron Glenn in Detroit. But I do think they're both going to get touches, and they're going to be really annoying for Breece Hall. I think that's what it's going to be. If you are a Breece Hall owner, you're going to be sufficiently annoyed, like you were many times last year, I think, by just how much those guys are on the field. I just don't. Breece hasn't shown the ability to be like a super elite, super productive back yet with a full season, over the course of a full season. And I think Aaron Glenn is going to see it in his best interest, in Breece's best interest, to keep him as fresh as possible and have it be more of a, I don't think we don't have this topic on here, but it was about Aaron Jones being kept fresh next year with Jordan Mason coming into the fold in Minnesota. And I buy that. I think that's going to happen. I could see Breece Hall kind of being the Aaron Jones, obviously much younger than Aaron Jones, but with similar sort of concerns about keeping him healthy. I could see it being, he's productive in spurts, but he's not going to be this high volume, super duper man RB1 that I envisioned for him going into last season per se. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I definitely think that we'll see more Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis. I don't think, Hall's going to be completely monopolizing the touches, but I still think Fantasy Pros has him as RB13 right now, which is the high end RB2 in this situation. And looking at some of these other guys in this area, all the guys in front of him, I'd rather have, Bucky Irving, Kyron Williams, James Cook, Chase Brown. Those are all guys I'd rather have than Breece Hall. But you look below him, McCaffrey's in a similar boat to him. Joe Mixon, Chuba Hubbard, Kenneth Walker, James Conner. I feel like Hall, along with McCaffrey, are the guys that have the highest ceiling of that group. Because just from a talent perspective, and again, if the situation is better for him, it could happen. It could very well happen.
I'll say that I think I'm looking at slightly different Fantasy Pros rankings from you, but same idea. Just the guys behind him. Breece Hall compared to these guys, who I'd rather have. Chase Brown, rather have Chase Brown. James Cook, rather have James Cook. Kenneth Walker, we can have a discussion, like I just mentioned. Joe Mixon.
I think I'd rather have Joe Mixon just from the. Yeah. But I could also see the Texans with another running back, though.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. As I'm saying, as we stand right now, if they don't add anybody with high draft capital, I'm going with Joe Mixon.
I am too.
Chuba Hubbard, that line in Carolina, I know they got Dowdle, but that's a debate for me. Like I could see Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen in the aggregate getting the same number of touches Rico Dowdle does. So then you have, who do you rather have? Chuba Hubbard, a guy with a better offensive line than the Jets have, and a quarterback who is less likely to siphon rushing numbers away from him like Justin Fields might in New York. I think it's a debate. So there's a lot of guys behind Brees. I don't see myself having much Brees Hall. So that's why I'm just kind of off that train a little bit, which makes me sad because I was very much a Brees truther. Mike Tyson. Next. Could a tight end be the number one receiver in the Packers offense? Is this BS or not BS? Matt LaFleur said, I think anything is possible. I would never want to limit it to just being a wide receiver. Pat, BS or not BS?
Hit the fart noise. Hit the fart noise.
Wait, I can loop it.
We have
super fart.
We have seen situations where tight ends are the number one focus. We're talking Travis Kelce. We're talking, looking back, Rob Gronkowski, Mark Andrews. Those are the cream of the crop tight ends. Those are some of the best tight ends of this generation.
What are you trying to say, huh? What are you trying to say?
That Tucker Kraft is not on the same strategy.
How dare you?
He looked great last year, and he's going to be a huge part of this offense and should be drafted as a tight end one here. But I think we're looking at a Packers team that could be similar to like the Bills, where there is no number one target. And especially with all these different Packers wide receivers doing all these different things, like Christian Watson straining his hamstring and Romeo Doubs being Jordan Love's bathtub mate, and Jaden Reed being kind of the trick play guy, and then Tucker Kraft kind of straight up center. They have so many different options that I don't think there's truly going to be a number one option there. Again, this is not to say that Tucker Kraft is not going to have a great year. I think he should be drafted as a tight end one, but. When I saw this, it was more of just like a why? Like, why was this even said? Like, this just felt like a conversation that did not need to be had at all.
This is one that I think the headline or the headline got editorialized a little bit. And this, I want to use this quote specifically because I agree with you, Pat. It's BS. I want to use this quote specifically as a warning and a lesson for fantasy players out there that see headlines like this of Matt LaFleur doesn't rule out Tucker Kraft being number one receiver on his team, or Matt LaFleur says a tight end could be the number one pass catcher in his offense. You got to dig into, and I know it's effort, I know it's tough, but you got to dig into where this quote came from, because Pat, when I watched the video and listened to the full excerpt about this conversation and Matt LaFleur talking about it, first of all, he was specifically asked, could Tucker Kraft or could a tight end be, the number one pass catcher in your offense? Again, what else is he going to say? No, absolutely not. I am going to put a cap on this guy and say that no matter what he does, that could never happen. Sure, in theory, of course it could. And a coach is going to want to prop his players up by saying, very complimentary things and leaving those doors open. As far as the odds it happens, Pat, he went on in that same video to talk about the fact that, yeah, you'd love to get, five out wide every play and be able to just run your offense like that, but you also have to be able to block some of these guys off the. He brought up blocking in that, and the fact that and tight ends have to do that, obviously, that's nothing new, unless you are, Travis Kelce, and you literally hardly ever do it. But, tight ends have to do that, and the fact that it was even brought up in that clip tells me, no, this is not going to be a case where Tucker Kraft is the next Travis Kelce and he's getting that many targets to be the tight end one overall. But that is what the headline was made out to sound like. These things are going to be intentionally misleading. And again, Tucker Kraft can and probably will be a very productive fantasy tight end. But some of these headlines from now through fantasy draft season are going to try to hype these things up more than they deserve to be. So Tucker Kraft, good player, but no, this is not news. This is a coach saying he likes Tucker Kraft and will not limit him, which fucking no shit. Okay, the last one we have on here, the Bills may not need a receiver. Brandon Beane on if they need to add a wide receiver. He said, needs? I wouldn't say needs, but we'll look for competition. I would say our offense did pretty good last year. Pat, BS or not BS that the Bills don't think they need a receiver?
No BS. No BS here. I kind of just alluded to it, the fact that this has consistently been an offense. Obviously, they've had Stephon Diggs, but that hasn't really had a number one guy. And again, similarly, they have guys that do different things. You look at Khalil Shakir, just signed a nice extension. We talked about him as one of these rock-solid slot guys, a huge part of an offense. Hopefully we see something from this. Is a huge year for Dalton Kincaid to beat the fraud allegations.
I'm so done with fantasy tight ends. I think I'm protesting that.
Well, that's the thing is am I going to be drafting Dalton Kincaid? No, I'm not. But could he potentially progress into what we want him to be? Absolutely. And we saw some good things from Keon Coleman as well, who they used good draft capital on. So, and I could very well be forgetting I know Mac Hollins and Amari Cooper are gone. I could be blanking here.
Did you mention Josh Palmer?
Josh Palmer, deep threat, and then fucking Curtis Samuel, who at least I thought was going to be something last year. Fart noise. But, cue it. Yep. So, yeah, I think the moral of the story is they've just got guys doing different things, and you don't necessarily need a number one option. Do I think they leave the draft with a wide receiver? Yes. Is it a high capital pick? I don't think it has to be.
Yeah, I don't think it's BS, but I kind of think it should be BS. I think they should prioritize receiver a little more. We talked about this when they got eliminated from the playoffs, which was the defense doesn't really have to care about anything in particular, which can be a good thing and can be a bad thing. But in the Bills' case, it kind of seemed like they could have really used that alpha sort of receiver to take a disproportionate amount of that defensive attention, because that's just going to open up even more avenues for Josh Allen to do some special things with his legs. Now, I know Josh Allen had arguably his best year, after they got rid of Stephon Diggs, but they can get a different type of alpha receiver. It doesn't have to be a Stephon Diggs. It doesn't have to be a guy that, supposedly was causing some trouble in the locker room because he wanted more targets or didn't like how certain things were going, which, I can't imagine Stephon Diggs would ever do. He's my Pookie, and he can do no wrong because he's a New England Patriot now. But I think the Bills could definitely use a high-end receiver just to add sure. Just because you have Josh Allen doesn't mean you should just be okay, well, our offense is fucking elite just because of this guy. We just need some sure-handed guys around him. It's yeah, but what if you got, some guy that could actually ascend? And, to be fair, they took their shot last year with Keon Coleman. We're not sure that he's going to quite be that guy. Maybe he takes a leap next year. But I think they should be maybe more proactive about this to really take the reins and be able to knock off, the Chiefs, who have just had their number year after year.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable take, and but like I said, I just don't. I think they believe that. You're right, they should, but I think Brandon Beane truly believes this.
Yeah. All right. Players that fooled us, Pat. Let's just do 3 picks apiece here, since we are getting toward the we yap pretty hard, but hey, look good. We got to fill these fucking shows.
It's a fucking podcast. What are we supposed to do?
We got to keep the lights on.
Dancing.
We could. I might make more money. This is players that fooled us in honor of April Fool's Day. Players that maybe showed a glimpse of elite talent, or they were going to be good for a long time, or at least longer than they were, and they said, April fucking Fools, we suck, and we're disappearing off the face of the earth. Now, Pat, you have the honors of our first overall pick in the Players That Fooled Us draft. Who are we rocking with the 101?
I had a direction here until actually during the podcast I was looking at some stuff, and I forgot about this guy. I was going to go with more of a one-game wonder, but I'm going Trent Richardson.
On my board. Good pick.
3 years? I didn't know. I figured he was at least sticking around for a while. For him to have the draft capital they had, for them to jump up a pick as well, and to have a solid first year, and then to just be absolutely fucking terrible. My goodness. We're not talking
April Fools.
We're not talking a guy who just, was underwhelming and didn't live up to the to the hype, but was still a regular NFL player. No, he was awful. He was absolutely miserable.
Yeah. He was real bad. I like that pick. I remember still, I have such a vivid memory of I was in driver's ed when he got traded to the Colts. And I remember, I don't know how much of an unk that's going to make me sound like. I don't know if that feels like a long time ago to you guys that Trent Richardson got traded versus me, being in driver school. But anyway, that was when it happened. I remember just looking down at my phone being completely awestruck that kind of deal would happen, because this was, we thought, one of the best running backs in the league, one of the running backs of the future. We were like, why the fuck would the Browns trade him away? And then, lo and behold, maybe one of the only savvy trades the Browns have ever made.
They saw the vision.
They saw the lack of vision for Trent Richardson. So yeah, I have such a vivid memory of that, looking down, just being, there's certain moves, not to equate it to the Luka deal, but it's where were you when it happened? This is somehow one of those deals, because at the time we thought he was going to be really good. I like that pick, Pat. My 10, I guess it's the 102. My first pick is an easy one for me. It was a no-brainer for me. It's another Cleveland Brown. But it's a guy that also put together one good season, but an even better season than what Trent Richardson did. And it's a guy who really withstood the test of time for people praying that he was going to get back to this high level. It's Josh Gordon, baby. We got to draft Josh Gordon.
Oh, shit, I thought you were going Peyton Hillis.
No. The poor fucking Browns, man. They have so many guys for this.
You literally described Peyton Hillis.
I did, because they've done this a lot. No, I'm going with Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon had that one glorious season in 2013. And here's the thing, maybe different than the rest of the guys on this list. Josh Gordon was a legitimately amazing talent as a football player, as a receiver.
Oh, yeah.
But this man just liked drugs more than he liked playing football. And
it was just fucking weed.
I know.
Imagine in 2024, with the shifting view on marijuana usage. I personally don't do it. But the fact that,
no one
he
cares
was
anymore.
treated like some absolute, convict.
Yeah.
A danger to society, because he was smoking some weed. Granted,
smoking a green bean.
Granted, he knew he wasn't supposed to be doing it and should not have been doing it. And no one, he was responsible for his downfall. But it's such a shame, because he was so good. I didn't have him on my list because I didn't want to talk about more extenuating circumstances. I kind of want to just talk about guys who were just ass.
That's the thing, though.
We thought he was going to be elite, man.
Yeah, that's the thing. It wasn't just extenuating circumstances, because, yes, he had those suspensions, but, then he came back. He had comebacks with the Chiefs. He had comebacks first with the Browns, then with the Patriots, then the Seahawks, then the Chiefs, and every single time, maybe toward the end it was more satire for people talking about it, but, every single time there were people well, what if he gets back to that old form? The circumstances, I guess, may have broken him mentally to an extent, to where he could never get back to that peak form that he had in that glorious season with Brandon Weeden as his quarterback. But I think this was
rookie.
This was a guy that we thought would be an all-pro receiver. We had every reason to believe that for years to come. And then, for several different reasons, it ended up not happening. So yeah, Josh Gordon fooled us into thinking he'd be a mainstay as this Julio Jones, AJ Green sort of counterpart in that era, and not meant to be.
That is insane now that the first three players we mentioned are Cleveland Browns. God, that is... And the thing is, that's only, I kind of really only looked from, 2005 on, was sort of, at least when I watched NFL, so,
yeah, same.
They had some fucking busts before that, too. Okay, all right. I don't want to take Peyton Hillis now, because we just kind of talked about him. I will go with someone who I think we kind of should have seen it coming, that it wasn't. He stepped in on a really good team and helped that team get to a spot where they could win a Super Bowl and got paid heavily for it. It's Brock Osweiler.
It's so funny. We keep describing players, and I keep thinking you're talking about someone else.
Do you think I was talking about Nick Foles?
I was thinking Matt Flynn, actually.
God!
Stepped in,
but that was really one game. But
Brock.
But the thing is, that Broncos team was just really good and a really well coached, well run team. And Osweiler was good enough. Granted, he had to be good enough to keep the team afloat. And then the Texans give him everything, and again, awful. We're not just talking he was terrible. He was absolutely terrible, and I think that's kind of forgotten as an overlooked, terrible signing of, the last decade or so.
It was pretty bad. I feel like some of these signings age better because quarterback contracts just get more and more ridiculous. So you kind of forget relatively how ridiculous it might have been at the time to overpay Brock with what they did, because in 2016 money is nothing compared to 2025 money. But yeah, that is a completely valid pick. John Elway just liked him some tall fucking quarterbacks, man. He didn't really care if they could play or not.
Hi, Paxton.
Yeah, literally. Brock Osweiler could not play, and a couple teams found that out the hard way. All right, with my next pick, I'm kind of sticking with like fantasy football flashes in the pan that just didn't last or never really even got off the ground. I'm going to go with a guy here that I hope this resonates for people listening, because it's not...
I think I know what it is.
No, I don't think you do. Because it's not one of those typical... remember this guy in fantasy. It's not your Thomas Rawls. It's not even your Monty Ball. It's not even your Jonas Gray. I'm going with Christine Michael, Pat.
Ooh, good
one. Christine Michael for the Seahawks. I feel like he doesn't get brought up that much in these conversations, but he was a guy that talent-wise we thought, or a lot of fantasy players thought, could be one of the elite running backs in this league. And man, this man just refused to do so. Christine Michael never got off the ground, and I don't know quite what the hype was with him. I think it might have been that he was just, like, his athletic scores were, off the charts, but at the end of the day, it's like, can you play ball? And the answer was no. I'm not even sure if he had, like, any significant games. I'm going back through his game logs. I just know this was a guy that the fantasy community was really obsessed with for a long time. So I'm going with Christine Michael.
Yeah, again, a name that I did not even think of.
It's the beauty of this draft, guys.
I'll shout some honorable mentions here. Kevin Ogletree, the one-game wonder. That's who I almost took at 101.
Yep,
similarly to Christian Michael, Ladarius Green, the heir apparent to Antonio Gates. He was supposed to be huge and was just never anything. I believe his name came up in our random tight end draft. Oh, you're gonna Steve Slayton. A running back who unanimous All-American crazy. We mentioned Peyton Hillis. I'm down to two wide receivers here who both kind of had similar issues. Fuck it. I'm going Justin Blackmon.
Yes.
In a similar situation to John, this kid was an absolute stud at Oklahoma State. My goodness. And the Jaguars took him, I believe, with like the 5th or 6th pick of that draft. And this is like the Moneyball scene where like, oh, this is Justin Blackmon, yada, 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 yada. His only downfall, that man needs his keys. And that man, get this man his keys right now. That man liked to drink and drive. And as fun as I imagine that being, you can't do that, Justin. You can't do it.
No, we can't.
The fact that he had like 800 yards in his rookie year, nothing crazy. He is in Jacksonville nonetheless. But for him to sort of just throw it all away. And here's the thing is, like, I don't think he necessarily fooled us because I think he would have been really good. I think similarly to Josh Gordon, I just think he would have been really good. But looking from the actual production, guy played 2 seasons in the NFL when he could have been a potentially elite talent. The other guy I was talking about was Kenny Britt. Remember when he was just insane? Then he had some PED suspension. Went elsewhere.
I feel like Kenny Britt kind of hung around for a while though.
But he did nothing. He stuck around in the league, but he didn't really do anything. And I remember I had Kenny Britt in fantasy that year. He went absolutely psycho, and it was incredible. But yeah, I'll go Justin Blackmon just because I think he could have been that much better. But this was more self-inflicted.
I think that's fair. I got a lot of great names on here, Pat. Again, I'll run through them before I make my last pick. Darwin Thompson. Remember Darwin Thompson?
Oh, God.
I loved him.
There's always that Chiefs running back in it. Isaiah Pacheco broke that trend.
Yep. Although I feel like there's some rumors the Chiefs might draft another running back, so Pacheco his days as the undisputed RB1, at least when healthy, could be numbered, especially they also re-signed Kareem Hunt. But Darwin Thompson was a guy that I really, really liked in the sort of post-Jamal Charles era of the Chiefs. Turned out to be nothing more than a preseason darling. Travis Fulgham we've got on here.
Pandemic Travis Fulgham, different
little
man.
mid-season blow up for Travis Fulgham. But Pat, with my last pick, I got to keep the bit alive, don't I? It's Kyle Pitts. That motherfucker fooled us, and he fools us every single year. He is fooling people again. And wait till he gets traded, Pat. Wait till he's no longer a Falcon. Wait until Michael Penix. First of all, he's going to fool people this year. Pat has turned around completely. He's not even looking at me. He's going to fool people this year because people are going to be like, oh, he's got Michael Penix now. Michael Penix has the arm. They're going to unlock him. Then he's going to get fucking traded somewhere, and it's going to be, oh, he just needed to change the scenery. Kyle Pitts is mid. The sooner we accept that, the better. So I am throwing him as my last pick on the players that fooled us draft. Thankfully for me, Pat, our viewers and my followers swear that I fall for him every single year. I have fallen for him exactly one time. Exactly once, because I learned.
You fell hard, man. You fell off a 100-foot cliff, man.
The problem that year was
tonight will be tonight.
The problem was that year I also fell for a lot of other bad players, so it exacerbated the issue. But I fell for him one time. People think I draft him every year and hope for the better. I kind of let them think that now because it's funny for the bit. But no, I learned one time. But so many people everywhere are falling for Kyle Pitts, and they're going to keep fucking doing it. But one day, they will realize this man is mid. So that rounds out.
I just didn't see it coming, man. I did not
well,
see it coming.
You didn't expect a non-throwback guy that's still playing pick? Yeah, Kyle Pitts. I have
forgot
Anthony Richardson on my board, too. I thought about him. But I'll go with Kyle Pitts.
The only current player I had on my list was Antonio Gibson. But also, for the guys and gals in the chat, we are ripping some great names here. I've seen Roy Halou, Isaiah Crowell. I'll throw Zach Stacy's name in there. Kendall Wright. The names here, this is truly just like dudes naming random NFL players, and fantastic. Great work, team.
Justin Forsett. Fuck yeah. All right.
Great team name.
Before we finish out the show, Pat, let's tie it all together with some March Madness reactions here. All number one seeds are in the Final Four. It's disgusting. I wait. Oh God, yes, please. Where is the fucking right there? I can take some solace in the fact, Pat, that I know ball because I said this was going to happen. I'm just not a bitch enough to actually do it in my bracket because fuck that. I would have been more angry at myself if I did it and ended up getting it wrong than I would be about, than the reward of picking all the one seeds and getting it right. I just don't care. I could have done that. That is what I genuinely thought was going to happen. But I wanted to find some differentiators in my bracket to be able to root for different teams in March Madness and not root for chalk. Because if you root for chalk, you're either a psychopath or a fucking school teacher. I can't be rooting for chalk out here. So all the number one seeds did end up in the Final Four. We've gotten some decent games. Florida versus Texas Tech was fun. That was a very, very good game.
Great game.
Still underwhelming. Pat, you wrote here that it could be worth it if these games deliver. I just disagree.
I think it'll be worth it in the sense that the Final Four and championship game was great. But for the tournament as a whole, I don't think it could be enough to save the image that this tournament's going to have. But I think we could. Yeah. But we are. These four teams are just so fucking good. They were one seeds for a reason, and they're getting here, and they all kind of have their unique paths to get here. Florida's had to grind it out against Yukon, rest in peace, and Texas Tech is well. So then you look at a team like Duke, who Wally Zerbiak keeps calling them the best team ever. Wally, knock it off. Absolutely knock it off. But buddy. Yeah, so even though it is the one seeds, I still think there's compelling basketball. I picked Florida originally, so I'm going to stick with that. I'd like Houston to win. I'd like for this full Kelvin Sampson redemption, just to see with all the NIL and all these other violation shit that have happened in the long time since that man needs to be vindicated. That man needs to be vindicated.
I think that's fair. I'm just at a point where, I think it's okay to be disappointed in this tournament, even if the next 3 games are insane. And, I expect them to be insane. We've kept hoping this entire tournament, right, that the games would get better as they went because it was the best teams advancing. I mean, the Elite Eight was 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 versus and 1-3. And the 1-3, funny enough, ended up being the best game of those. Yeah. So we didn't end up with what we hoped for, which was that the games would really overall improve as we went on. I mean, God forbid, if these games end up being a blowout, that I am just hurling myself off a bridge. But this is the point where I think we can more confidently say that's going to happen, because the one fun part that I will admit about this Final Four is, for those of you KenPom enjoyers out there, it sounds unreal. All 4 of these teams are top 10 in KenPom all time. These are 4, according to KenPom. KenPom's been around for like 25 years. 2002, I think, was when it was, maybe 2000. But a little over 2 decades. KenPom says these are 4 of the top 10 basketball teams it has ever charted. And they are now going to beat each other up for the right to win a championship. I can now put aside my anger about how chalk this tournament has been and be ready to enjoy these games, because I do think they're going to be fucking lit. My beef with the tournament, and with the people who are just dense about it and, saying, oh, these games are going to be great, so it makes up for it, is we could have ended up with all 1 seeds in the Final Four and just taken a more fun road to get there. That's all I was asking for. Like, would I have been a little disappointed if the Elite Eight was, a 1 versus a 7 and a 1 versus a 9 and the ones won all of those games? Sure, but at least it would have provided some excitement in the rounds prior that those lower seeds actually won games. So, look, I'm excited about the games that we have left to go, but I don't think there's any way that it completely makes up for the lack of excitement we've had in this tournament. I think when we look back, years from now, we're going to say, yeah, the Final Four was cool, but like that tournament fucking sucked. And that's okay. I think that's okay to have that full perspective.
I think that could very well be what this ends up.
And I am also with you, Pat. I'm going with Florida. Picked them from the beginning. I've been historically pretty good at picking these champions. I'm not good at picking nothing else in the bracket. My brackets are always decisively mid every year, just like Kyle Pitts. But I do usually get the champions right. So I'm going to hope that I continue that trend going. I picked Florida. I'm sticking with them. Weekly Yukon update. We will round out with this. Go Huskies, baby. Jalen Stewart is coming back. Wonderful news. The Huskies, as every team does. I mean, college basketball is a fucking hellscape of just overall free agency now every offseason. But the Huskies had a lot of guys that we expected to enter the portal. Basically, all of them did. But Jalen Stewart, Pat, not only is he coming back, it sounds like he never really entertained leaving, which is really, really awesome for the program, because Yukon does have, we mentioned, in prior shows, like we have these great freshmen coming in who are also actually about to tip off in the McDonald's All-American game. We have some great freshmen coming in.
Is that game on TV?
I think so. I think it's about to be. I'm gonna put it on after this pod's over.
Shit, I'm gonna too now.
Yeah, so we have a lot of players coming in. Jalen Stewart was one guy who we thought deserved more playing time this year. Every time he came in, it seemed like something good happened, and so it was very reasonable that he could leave, go somewhere, want to be the guy. But I guess A, he wasn't interested in doing that, and B, I would assume he was given some assurances that he is going to be a starter and a focal point next year, which he absolutely deserves to be. We are thrilled to have him back.
He should be the starting 4 next year. There's talks about Alex Caravan, but I would much rather have Jalen Stewart than fifth-year Alex Caravan right now. It's great because I was saying to my dad and friends that like if he transfers, this will be Dan Hurley's big fumble, because Dan Hurley has done really well in terms of picking out this talent. Like some of these guys that he's brought in that weren't necessarily transferred, went elsewhere, like Corey Floyd at Providence or Rasul Diggins at UMass, for example. Like they've been solid players, but like would they have been parts of that championship
team? It's not guys we're really missing.
That's what I mean. No, Jalen Stewart would have been that kind of guy that you missed when he was gone. And had he forced him away with the lack of playing time, that would have been a historic fumble. And he's still got 1 more year to do it. If Stewart comes back and he fucks him again, then I could still say that Dan Hurley missed the mark on this one. But at least as of right now, he didn't. And I think Jay Stu he's my favorite player on the team by far. It's just every time he's out there, he's doing something, to really ignite that team. And especially with them losing guys like Hassan Diarra and Samson Johnson, who were kind of big exclamation point kind of players. They need somebody like him. And again, he'll be a junior on a team with him and Ball and Reed are kind of be the veterans. And I'm sure they will get a veteran in or two in the transfer portal as well. To go with these excellent freshmen, I think it's going to be a great combination. I think it's hard to say like, oh, Yukon's so back because they didn't really go away for very long. Like they were still solid this year, but things are looking up, and they lose. You go and lose kind of inconsequential pieces. We talk about Aiden Mahaney. I still feel bad for the kid. I hope he goes somewhere and plays well. And then the two freshmen, I'm a Noel, who again could play, but with the point guards, with Darius Adams coming in and them surely getting a point guard in the portal. It just wasn't going to happen. I think he's going to go somewhere and play. And hey, Yusuf Singari, I hear New Britain's beautiful this time. You're a big Connecticut guy, aren't you? How about it?
The Central Connecticut pitch. Here we go.
But here we go. But Yusuf Singari is a national champion. Is a national champion.
That's true.
And that's all that matters. He has as many national championships as Jim Boeheim. And that's all that needs to be said about them. Good luck to these guys. Any of you are welcome at Central. We're going to the promised land.
Fair enough. Go Huskies.
Breaking my heart.
Go Huskies, and Silas DeMary Jr., if you're listening, come to Stores, buddy. We could use you. He's on his official visit today. Georgia point guard. Really good.
Well, the North Carolina guy as well, Yukon, was in. I forget his name. He was Elliott.
He committed to Michigan. He is done.
Fuck.
He is gone. Silas DeMary's better, so we don't fucking care. All right,
Terrace Reed, come back.
Please. That'll do it for this episode of Brand Coverage. We will be back next week, possibly with a mock draft episode. Maybe we'll wait for the. I don't know. I'm going to WrestleMania soon, Pat, so we might not do a pod that week. So we might do our mock draft next week. We might do it next week. That'll do it for this episode. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys with a mock draft or without it next week. Catch you later.
Jerry Jones back shots. Bye-bye.
What?
You said something like that. No.
I didn't say back shots.
You implied it.
Me? What do I do? Oh, yeah, Pat.
Roll the tape.
You implied Jerry Jones back shots is not a sentence I want spoken to me ever again. All right, we'll go through our super chat messages, and then we'll go through some regular chat messages. But first with the super chats, Bucko, 5 pounds, as usual. Thank you, brother. Said, what do the Pats do at 4 with the New York Giants having 2 quarterbacks and betting odds being slashed for them getting Hunter/Carter? Do they trade back or go for a Genty? So if we're assuming the Patriots are sitting there and Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter are all off the board, which I have accepted as a distinct possibility this entire time because it seems like Shador is sliding, in mocks at least. I think I would most prefer a trade back if somebody were to entertain it. Would I be upset if we were to draft a Will Campbell or there's another tackle whose name I escapes me right now. It's very long. Or even, I don't know, a Mason Graham on the defense. Like, we want to keep going just with the defense. I would be okay with that, but I think the best way to optimize the assets, if the offer is there, again, you can't create an offer out of thin air. If the offer is there to go back and get maybe a couple of picks in like the teens or so, I'd be totally okay with that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. If you can't get one of those two guys, you could see a position where a team may want to trade up for Shador. But, if you stay at 4, I think you take Will Campbell in that situation. I don't think you take Genty at 4 there with the Patriots' needs. I don't think you do that, and because if someone other than the Raiders takes him, my crash out will be historic.
Josh with $5 said, if the NFL wants more kickoff returns, remove the touchback altogether unless the ball is kicked out of the end zone.
No, you still got to go get it out of the end zone and bring it back.
You got to go get it out of the 5th row. I'm trying to think, is this a feasible option? Like, because he's referring to like you catch it in the end zone and that you have to take it out. I guess that could help. I don't know. What's your...
There's some man named Brandon Gustafson in the chat. Gustafson with an F.
Oh dear.
I'm with a V. He's our namesake. Don't be proud of that, pal.
You are our love child.
Word?
Man, we made you on a drunk.
Remember that John? I'm sure you've heard that John Kruk clip where it's like, I love that name, Malachi. When you and I have a child, we should name him Malachi.
Fuck no,
Tom McCarthy just loses his shit. Yeah.
Anyway, Josh, I guess fair point on the kickoffs as we get distracted by Brandon Gustafson. Omega Recon with $9.99 said, so I've been seeing people talking about the Giants should wait next year until next year for a quarterback. What if Russ and Winston is just good enough to keep the team out of a top 5 pick and nobody wants to trade back? Yeah, that's the risk, right? Because like waiting until next year for a quarterback, you can't just go into a season and say like, we're going to wait because we want Arch Manning, say next year. Because you don't know where you're going to finish. Like, even if you are the worst team on paper, no team in football actively tanks. We've talked about this time and time again because the coaches and the players are playing for their jobs. They're playing for their pride. The only semblance of tanking that ever takes place is from the front office's point of view, where they are just not putting together a very competitive roster. And we have seen that happen. But yeah, look, you make a good point. Like, I think the idea is just that the Giants, even if they end up with like a 10th or 11th pick next year versus they're sitting at number 3 right now, the crop of quarterbacks could just be that much better next year that if you're going to take a stab at the position, you just wait. Again, I am on record as of this pod, like I still think they will take one in like the middle rounds and just maybe it not be a super high commitment sort of pick. They just kind of, throw a dart and hope it sticks. But yeah, this is absolutely the risk, but I see it from that perspective of like, if the class is overall better, you just have more of a pick of the litter of guys that you think are worthy of being a franchise. Like, if you don't think there's a franchise quarterback in this draft, you can't force the issue. And I think that's where they're at.
That's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, like whether you have a worse draft position next year or not, like you figure it out when you get there. You don't sit here and be like, I guess we just take one.
And obviously it's a possibility. I'm on the record saying they're going to be ass. Even with Russ or James,
Agreed.
I don't think that fixes all the issues that they're going to have with mediocre quarterback play.
Agree. Alex with $4.99 said Anthony Richardson is simply a quarterback that the Colts forgot to convert to tight end. Yeah, I think I think Mo Alley Cox Part 2 Electric Boogaloo could be upon us. I know Mo Alley Cox wasn't a quarterback. I don't think he was. He was a basketball
player. Could you imagine? He was a basketball player. What do you mean he was a quarterback?
VCU. Yeah. No, I know he wasn't a quarterback. But yeah, look, these athletic guys being converted to tight end is nothing new for the Colts. Yeah, I mean, hey, Pat, the Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson stack could be elite in fantasy.
They're both tight ends.
They're both tight ends just lateraling it to each other with fucking Sam Ellinger as their quarterback. No, he signed to the Broncos, so he's out of commission.
Ew.
Jeff with $1.99 said Lake Erie connects to Cleveland, just FYI.
If you go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame over there, it's just an absolutely stunning scenery there. I've been there once about a decade ago, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is great. Cleveland rocks.
Your weekly reminder, Pat, that George Pickens is going to win Offensive Player of the Year.
We got to tally up GP Glazer. We got to tally GP Glazer's donations here. How much this guy is going to make sure my 3 daughters can eat because he needs to let people know that George Pickens is going to win OPOY.
I don't read YouTube comments too often because there's just so many, but I caught him commenting on one of the YouTube videos the other day, and it was just about George Pickens again, and I was like, brother, my lord.
I love a good bit. Like, I would say like 90% of my personality is bits, so yeah. I respect the hell out of GP Glazer. Top 5, top 10 listener. Maybe we can make the power ranking someday.
We could draft our loyal listeners of the show.
Shit, that would actually be kind of fun.
I think
but then we have to physically battle.
I think our 101 is probably our next donation, which is Alex again with $1.99 saying ChatGPT just named Steve Slayton and T-Rich. Bravo as far as April Fool's players. So yeah, completely on the right track there with those guys and with our draft.
Steve Slayton was insane at West Virginia. He was insane. Him and Pat White, my goodness.
Arian Foster was what we wanted Steve Slayton to be. All right, a couple messages from the general chat. Brandon Gustafson saying, LOL, love it, guys. Keep up the great work. Thank you. What question we got, Pat?
Stoner Goth Girl Spam. Interesting name. Do you think the Raiders... Oh, God, it went away. But it was asking, do you think the Raiders would be better off taking Genty or Shador? If the Raiders take Shador Sanders, I will hurl my body off a 10-foot skyscraper. 10-story, 10 feet. I stand by 10-foot skyscraper. I'm going to sprain my ankle. I'm going to sprain my fucking ankle. I've never actually sprained my ankle before, so I hear it hurts like hell.
Oh my!
My back just disintegrates on me once a year. I'd rather have the sprained ankle.
I was going to say. You and I have a lot of similarities between, the sports obsession. We don't drink. We're from the same place. But if there's one difference, my ankle is in almost a constant state of sprained. It's gotten better since I lost weight, truthfully. But like high school and stuff, Pat, my ankle, I would just be standing and it would just, hey, actually, no. And it would just twist. And that was not fun.
But back to my point, in all seriousness, the Raiders do not need to take Shedeur Sanders. You go and trade for Geno Smith and you're essentially going to pay Geno Smith. There's no need for Shedeur to sit behind him, especially when you have so many other needs. Even if you don't take Genty, take Will Campbell. Take somebody, more somebody else on defense. Like, Shedeur is just not the move. Like, if Genty is there at 6, I will be so upset if they do not take him. Like, I am all in.
But Pat, Shedeur would look so cool in the black and silver. Have you considered that?
He would, and Vegas would never be the same with Shedeur there. Shedeur, if you get drafted there, I'm going in August. We should link up, all right? Meet me at Topgolf.
Yeah, that'd be great content. Hey, I'll meet you guys there. Tyler Quigley says, what are your thoughts on Jalen McMillan, considering him heavily for both redraft and dynasty? I like McMillan right now as maybe Dart throws the wrong answer, but like, obviously, a lot of his value is going to come down to Chris Godwin's health, right? We as of right now, expect Chris Godwin. Things are trending, I believe, toward him being ready for week 1 or close to it. And even a hobbled sort of Chris Godwin or maybe a less than prime Chris Godwin is going to take a lot of that playing time from McMillan. With that said, like, talent earns opportunity, right? Like, if Jalen McMillan really takes that step forward and is like, look, year 2 leap, I am comfortable in the NFL now. Like, I'm a guy you can rely on. I could see him being a good fantasy asset. However, like, I think we have to approach it as Godwin and Evans are going to be healthy. And in that case, I feel like there's going to be players I like better than McMillan at where he goes in redraft, at least. Dynasty is a much different story. Obviously.
Yeah, I like him a lot more in Dynasty. I think the player that I kind of compare him to is like Bengals Tyler Boyd, where a really, really solid player. Just behind 2 really, really good wide receivers who command a majority of the work. But you're also looking at Mike Evans aging. These guys aren't getting any younger here. So for Dynasty, absolutely Jalen McMillan should be there. Redraft this year, I view him kind of more as a late-round flyer. And you can't forget Kate Otten as well. And they're going to run the ball like absolute lunatics again, probably. So... I really like my father. I really like him as a I really like him as a real life player. Fantasy this coming year, I just don't know.
Bucky Irving is the football player of all time. So yeah, that's definitely a good point. Bailey said, if real CFB coaches get in the game, CFB 26 he means, how hilarious would it be to see Bill Belichick in a CFB game before Madden? Would be very funny to me. I would love to see his frowning UNC hooded ass on that sideline in CFB 26. That would be wonderful.
We're on to Coastal Carolina. We're on to Appalachian State.
My girlfriend is young. I don't know. I was trying to think of something off the cuff to say there, but almost everything I thought of was going to get me canceled, so never mind.
I don't want to know.
JB Bass said, since rookie quarterbacks seem to be getting better and better, how long do you think it'll be until a rookie quarterback wins a Super Bowl? I think like we're well in that era that it could happen anytime with the right one. I don't think being young is a preclusion from that happening anymore. Jaden Daniels was fucking close, like all things considered, if we're being honest. So it could happen anytime.
I think just the hardest thing, obviously, is the best quarterbacks typically go at the top of the draft, and these teams, unless they trade up, are at the top of the draft for a reason. I think it would have to be a situation like Lamar Jackson going in the last pick of the first round to a good Ravens team, or Russell Wilson getting plucked in the mid rounds to a really good Seahawks team. It would have to be some kind of situation like that. But I feel like this day and age, a lot of these really good quarterbacks get found sooner than later and don't end up in the best positions, at least in their rookie year.
Yeah. All right. We'll do one last thing here before we jump up. Ryan said, Joe just got traded to the Cowboys. Tyreek. A, what? B, I assume you're trying to tell me that the Cowboys traded for Tyreek Hill, which A, didn't happen. B, I need you guys all to understand something. because maybe this isn't clear. Maybe you guys don't know this about me. I am the most plugged into football news out of literally any human being on this planet not named Adam Schefter. I have notifications on in so many different apps, in so many different ways, that I can promise you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that if Tyreek Hill got traded, my ass would know before yours does. That's all. I am not going to be tricked ever by a chatter saying that somebody signed or got traded, even during a podcast. Even during a podcast, I would find that out before you guys come and tell me. So there's just no universe where I'm going to get got by something like this. I just want to make that clear.
I thought this was more of a Joe Mama setup. I thought this was more like a Who's Joe setup, which you can't beat the king. You cannot beat the D's Nuts king here. You will not win that war.
That's fair. All right. I think that will do it for the show this week. On that note, for Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next time.
Good night.